Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Red, and welcome to a pretty special live event that I like to call Red's Favorite Fantasy Football Tools. Try saying that 3 times fast. On this video, live event, whatever, I'm going to show you 3 of my favorite things that I like to use for fantasy football. These are all items that I use constantly to get information, to get advice, and to hone my craft. You notice that I have a FantasyPros site up, but we'll get to that in a bit. First things first, I'm going to show you my favorite Reddit community. That would be Reddit Fantasy Football. This is also my favorite fantasy football community. On this particular site, on this particular Reddit subreddit page, there is so much information to gobble up here. You can also get so much advice from people that generally know what they're doing in fantasy football. Who's killing it this preseason? Let's just look at this. Somebody immediately mentions Travis Kelce, which, of course, Travis Kelce is one of my personal favorite breakout guys from this year. Kelvin Benjamin had a pretty good preseason game tonight, and he's been pretty good so far throughout preseason. But of course, New England's defense pretty much shut down Carolina. But this is probably my favorite place to go in terms of going to a community. This is easily the tops for me because there's so many people that come in, not just average Joe Schmoes, but actual experts of fantasy football. So if you have a question, you need advice, you just want somebody to grade your draft, rate your team, this is the best place to go. It is absolutely perfect. The next page I want to show you is something that I love, because if you want the one-stop place to find every single important article about fantasy football, someone's opinion, someone's rankings, whatever you want to go to FantasyRundown.com. And particularly, I have the football page bookmarked. Like, this is, to me, the ultimate if you're looking for anything and everything fantasy related. Everything you could possibly imagine, every link you could possibly imagine, every opinion, every ranking, it's all here. You have look up at the top, Beginner's Guide to Auction Drafts. You have an opinion on value quarterback on draft day, and they're saying Tony Romo. A couple spots down, look at that. Jay Cutler should have a career season. There's so many opinions, so many rankings. There's so much to digest. It would take hours to digest it all. But it is perfect if you're a newbie and you really need some information. Hell, it's good for you if you're an expert and there's certain items you may not know about. Basically, if there's an injury, if there's an opinion, if there's a news article, if there's rankings worth noting, it's on this site. But neither of these are my favorite resources for fantasy football. As you may have guessed, my favorite resource is FantasyPros, particularly their Draft Wizard. Their Draft Wizard is unbelievable. You have the ability to sim a draft in 5 minutes, or as long as you want, really. There's no clock. There's no timer on you. You could basically take your time. You could be as leisurely as you want. You could also have the ability to analyze your drafts, either drafts that you simulated on FantasyPros.com, or you could import drafts. You could import drafts from ESPN, from Yahoo, from CBS, even from Fantasy Football Calculator. You can create your own cheat sheets, and even though I've created some, it's not something I would ultimately recommend. It's one of the lesser tools in this Draft Wizard, but it's worth it though, especially if you're a novice. And also, look at this, they actually offer notes from top fantasy experts, worth noting as well. There's an auction dollar calculator. Actually gives you values for every important player that gets taken in auction drafts. It is wonderful. And you also have the option to choose, okay, you want a PPR values, want PPR values, okay, go back to standard. You can have standard values. It's amazing. But the best tool by far is the Draft Assistant. It's something that you can only get with the Pro membership for Fantasy Pros, which if you deposit $10 to DraftKings, assuming you're of age, you can get everything. You can sync up with ESPN, with Yahoo, with NFL.com. You can also even do mock draft assistance, say for Yahoo or ESPN. It's a beautiful, beautiful app. It's perfect. And it offers basically the most comprehensive assistant that you could pull up without going deeper into it with, say, like Excel cheat sheets and stuff like that, which I do have some myself, but I'm not going to show you those because I don't want people to know about those. Hint, hint. Okay, what I was going to do to end this was I was going to do some draft simulations, and particularly of some draft some draft mock drafts you may not normally see. The first I'm going to do is a 12-team PPR league mock draft. And you'll notice here you can actually draft against a lot of options. You can draft against experts. You could draft against sadly only for PPR you get Fantasy Football Calculator ADP, but you get a lot more if you just do standard. And you could also draft against the big three, ESPN, Yahoo, and NFL.com's pre-draft rankings. You can also use whatever cheat sheet you want. You can use the latest Fantasy Pros expert consensus ratings. You can use your own. It's honestly great. Hell, if you need to prep for your own league draft, you can actually use your own settings, the settings from that league, and use them to mock as many drafts as you want. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, I guess here I'll draft from one of the toughest positions to draft from, one of the toughest spots to draft from, and that's position 7. Now, you'll notice this doesn't take long whatsoever. It really doesn't. So the first 6 picks are going to come off the board. Peterson, Charles, McCoy, Megatron, Forte, and Graham. Now, I have a tough decision because in PPR, for example, Eddie Lacy all of a sudden is not necessarily the guy you want. You probably want someone like a Demaryius Thomas or a Des Bryant. Elite wide receivers are going to get a lot of receptions. Now, me, I'm going to go Demaryius because I'm really high in Demaryius Thomas, given the fact that he's getting passes thrown to him by Peyton Manning. I want the guy that's getting the most passes thrown to him, other than maybe Julius Thomas. Now, you get to the second round, and you'll notice that, of course, there's a lot less, there's a lot less elite talent, but there's still a lot of talent. And now you notice you have Giovanni Bernard being suggested, my top suggestion was 57% of the expert consensus out of the 4 that are up here. But you also have top wide receiver talents like Antonio Brown and Jordy Nelson to consider, and you also have both their bye weeks and their average draft position. Now, me, I'm taking Gio Bernard here 10 times out of 10 just because of his PPR possibilities. I gotta have Gio Bernard. And just judging based on what's available at this point, I actually have a pretty tough decision once it comes back around to me. Because as you'll see, it looks like other than Graham, you have the top 2 tight end options in Gronkowski and Julius Thomas, and you have the second and third quarterback options in Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees. However, running back and wide receiver are starting to get a little bit depleted. Having said that, here is a little bit of a nugget for you, and this is something that you're going to get a lot of, just like a random nugget. I think that running back and wide receiver are deeper than many people let on, particularly running back. Wide receiver's deep. Now, I'm of the belief that there are 35 guys that could be wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 this year. So I'm not going to panic if say, I wait a couple picks and all of a sudden, oh no, Julian Edelman is out there basically as the top wide receiver. I'm not going to panic because he's an okay wide receiver 2 in a PPR league. Now, some people will tell you running back is scarce because that's the position that everyone goes for at the beginning. Now, let me say this. If you're drafting in a standard or a PPR league, you're going to want one of the top 4 running backs. That, of course, I'm referring to Jamal Charles, LaShawn McCoy, Adrian Peterson, and Matt Forte. You're going to want one of those 4 guys. Those are the 4 elite running backs. Once you get past them, every single running back you get to has some sort of flaw or worry about them. Once you get past those 4, though, I could also make the argument that there's not really that much separating, say, 5 and 15, and furthermore, 16 to 35. I think that there is a lot of depth down below in the running backs. I think that you could get a really good value. You could get a running back too, a second running back, say, in the 5th round, even of a standard league, let alone a PPR. Basically, what I'm getting at is this. I like getting running backs and wide receivers and basically ensuring that I have them, basically stockpiling them in a standard league. In PPR, especially in a situation like this, I kind of honestly want to have some big names, some elite players at the big positions. And if that's the case, while Gronk is kind of intriguing, I want Aaron Rodgers. And you can't really go wrong with Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees, but I'm going with Rodgers. Now, here's something else worth noting. By the time it got back around to me, you'll notice that Gronkowski and Julius Thomas went off the board, and Brees is on the board still. Now, this is a really cool feature about the fantasy in the draft simulator that you can't obviously get in a live draft. You can actually revert to the previous pick that you made, and if you think that you made a poor decision, which obviously, okay, just pick up Bernard again because, you know, I went back a little bit too far. Now, if you say, okay, if Drew Brees is going to be there on your next turn, then why not take Gronkowski? Now, I'm not going to do that this time because, honestly, I'm not going to cheat. I'm going to take the guy that I originally took in the 3rd, and that would be Aaron Rodgers. But I now have that information just in case. Now, here is something interesting now, though, because at this point, I could basically sit back on tight end for a while. I'm probably not going to take a tight end for a little bit, for at least a couple rounds. So now you start thinking, okay, let's go to wide receiver and running back. Who do you choose here? Now, some will say Alfred Morris, but they're not taking into account that this is a PPR league. And in a PPR league, I tend to value Victor Cruz a little bit more because he gets more catching possibilities. Alfred Morris does not get catches. He is not a pass-catching running back. He's not. And in that case, I'm going to take Victor Cruz. And I also noticed that there's some really good talent. There's some pretty good talent still left at running back. So I'm going to go on and take Cruz and take my chances. And as it turns out, none of the running backs got taken by that point other than Rashad Jennings and Ray Rice. Now, here's the way I see this now that it's down to basically Gerhardt and Morris. Once you get to this point, then you can make the argument, okay, maybe you should take Alfred Morris. Because even if he's not a PPR magnet, he's still going to get you a lot of rushing yards and quite a few touchdowns. And if you look at it from that standpoint, as a 5th-round pick, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Now, this is probably going to be a tough decision for me because now I'm starting to think, okay, I'm probably not taking a quarterback because I am of the belief that I can wait on getting a top-level quarterback after you well, I don't even need a quarterback now. What am I saying? I already picked up Aaron Rodgers. Okay, so now I'm thinking, now usually around this time I start stockpiling a few running backs, but I'm also noticing that tight ends starting to get a little less deep. Now, I could probably wait until the next pick to draft a tight end. With that in mind, I'm wanting Ben Tate or Pierre Thomas. Now, this is a tough decision. Pierre Thomas is probably going to be a PPR magnet, but Ben Tate is going to be a workhorse in Cleveland. I can't believe I'm about to do this, but I'm going to take Pierre Thomas. I'm really high on Ben Tate, but he's injury-prone, and I know what I'm going to get from Pierre Thomas. Now, as you'll notice, Jordan Reed just went off the board, and I love Jordan Reed, so that kind of stinks, but it's not that big of a deal either. There's a lot of depth at running back and at wide receiver. There's not really as much depth at tight end. There's 3 tight ends, honestly, that I like at this point as a starter beyond basically guys I'd be reaching on. Olsen, Pitta, and Ertz, which is basically how the ranking goes there, but I like Ertz a little more than Olsen and probably Pitta too. My theory is this. I can wait. I can go on ahead and take Frank Gore here and have a really strong running back core. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take Gore. Now, am I right? Well, in the sense that Pitta and Ertz are there, yes, I was right. And in that case, I feel confident about taking Pitta, because I'm pretty high in Pitta this year. Now, as you'll notice, at quarterback, I'm pretty much at the will and at the mercy of those who have already taken quarterbacks. Thankfully, though, Jeremy Maclin is still on the board, and I can take him as my third wide receiver. I don't like to stay on a set path. Like, okay, Russell Wilson. I'll take Russell Wilson as my starter. Okay? I don't like passing up on Emmanuel Sanders, but I do need... wait. Okay, I'm going to revert. I keep thinking under the mindset that I haven't already taken a quarterback. So, now, see, this is where the revert previous pick can actually make sense, because I don't need Russell Wilson. I've got Aaron Rodgers. Emmanuel Sanders, because that's who I actually wanted to take all along. This is live, as you can tell. And Carlos Hyde, I know it's suggesting Andy Dalton, but with Aaron Rodgers, I don't necessarily need a top-level backup. And now they're suggesting by a wide margin DeAndre Hopkins, and that's probably who I'm going to go with, but I am going to look at my options. You'll notice that the Panthers are still available as a defense. However, as you noticed, you may have noticed in the previous video, I looked up the Panthers. Might have not even been in the previous video, actually. Well, in the third preseason game, the Patriots offense destroyed the Panthers defense. Worth noting, it was the dress rehearsal game, you know. So I'm going to go on ahead and take DeAndre Hopkins as my fifth wide receiver and just have a huge, amazing core there. And this probably means I'm not going to take a backup tight end, but that's okay. I thought of crazier things to do. Now I'm going to go on ahead and take Joe Flacco, because I do need a backup quarterback, at least one, and I like Joe Flacco as a backup option for Rodgers. Once you get to, the defense, basically my two choices are either the Cardinals or the Chiefs, and I like both defenses, contrary to what some of you might have been told. But I am going to go with the Cardinals just because they're an NFC West defense. I tend to trust NFC West defenses. And because basically all that's left is kickers, I'm taking Mason Crosby, and I'm done. I don't know how long exactly that took me, but I doubt it took as long as it would have to do an actual mock live draft. And now, you can also go and analyze your draft pick. See how your team did. Now, when the page loads, the first thing you'll see is projected standings, basically the amount of points that it's projected that you'll score. Overall, starters, and bench. This might take a little bit, though, because sometimes it does take a little bit. Okay. Now, you'll notice I finished first, while Calvin and the Chipmunks, pretty good name, a pretty good computer-generated name, Blunt Rushmore, Marshawn Tasted, Dwayne Bowe, and Bolden on for dear life finished with over 1,200 points. Now, you can notice you go to draft analysis and you get, what the hell is going on here? As it turns out, the green is basically highlighting the steals, which is 2+ rounds. But you could also change this to say, okay, where did some teams get value picks, for example? And that opens things up a little bit more, where, say, now some teams have other green highlights. Then you have, okay, which ones did slight reaches? Okay, those are highlighted. Did any team reach? Yes, actually, I reached quite a bit for Joe Flacco, but so did a lot of people for their players. That's kind of what I'm talking about. I love FantasyPros analysis. It's fantastic. And then the team analysis, which is pro only. This gives you the option to see, based on the rankings that you selected, based on the cheat sheet you selected, how you did overall, basically based on what other teams picked as their starters. You notice I did pretty okay. I mean, Dennis Pitta is my worst, and tight end is my worst position. That could be the That's not the worst thing in the world. Kicker and defense are next. Running back follows, which isn't great, but the rest of my positions are in the top 4. So I enjoyed that. You can also get a very, very worth it detailed analysis from Football Guys. That, to me, is even more worth it than anything else offered by Fantasy Pros, because it gives you the ability to get a detailed, in-depth analysis, not just of what you pick, the players you picked, but of their combined schedules, their schedule strengths. What else? You get the option of seeing who you could have drafted, if they're good, if for bench players, if they're good depth picks, so on and so forth. It's a great option to have. And then you also have a draft board as well as team rosters. It's I actually think the draft analyzer is probably, other than draft assistant, my favorite part of the draft wizard. But now that we're done with that, I'm going to go on ahead and do another mock draft. This one's a little different. I'm going to go on ahead and do a 14-team standard draft. I'm going to go with what it automatically set for me. So I'm going to go with the second pick. And I'm going to go on ahead and choose Yahoo, NFL, ESPN, and Fantasy Football ADPs for average draft positions as basically a composite of my own. So I start the mock draft, and the very first person taken, if it'll load, maybe LaShawn McCoy. That makes my choice easy. It'll be Jamal Charles. Now I have to wait 24 picks before my next turn. Now, what is interesting about this is, believe it or not, there are actually quite a few options here this late. Now, it says that I should probably take one of Rodgers or Ellington, but it also says that Antonio Brown is getting a 31% expert consensus, and that's who I was going to take. I need top-level talent no matter what. And I know that Rodgers or Breeze are going to be there when it goes around. So he took Rodgers, I'll take Breeze. Pretty simple. Now, here we go again. Now we get to wait a while. I've taken a quarterback, so I just have to forget about that now. I'm going to go on and take Frank Gore. In the standard league, I like Frank Gore as a second running back. But I'll try to make sure to get Carlos Hyde later if I can. But I don't want to reach for him. I'm going to take Ben Tate as my flex because, like I said, I like a lot of guys as potential wide receiver twos, as second wide receivers. Like the guy that I'm going to draft right here, Marcus Colston, as my second wide receiver. He's fantastic. He's always underrated in fantasy. I'm left with a pretty tough decision as far as tight end is concerned because I could wait and hope that maybe Reed or Pitta falls to me. But if they don't, then I've kind of made a mistake, probably. On the other hand, I'm kind of worried that Carlos Hyde won't fall to me either. This is actually a pretty tough decision for me, but I think I'll go Witten just to make sure that I get my tight end straightened out. And Carlos Hyde did not fall to me. Carlos Hyde went, well, more than 5 picks before mine, so not terrible. It says that I shouldn't take a running back here. If we go based on what the team right below, ahead of me and behind me did, yeah, actually that makes sense. I should take Wayne. Get that out of the way. Because I think I'm going to get a good option at running back even despite that. Yeah, because it's saying that I should draft Sammy Watkins, but there's so much wide receiver depth this year that I just don't see the need. I'd rather go on and take Kyrie because I'm really high on Kyrie Robinson this year. Could be Kyrie too. I think it's Kyrie. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Now here I'm left with an interesting decision because, excuse me. Well, it's not really that interesting of a decision because the guy that would be behind or in front of me already has a backup tight end. So I don't even really need to worry about that. What I do need to worry about is, okay, what do I want to do in terms of, okay, do I want a quarterback? I'm not going to draft the defense yet. I think I'm going to go on ahead and take Kelvin Benjamin here, because Kelvin Benjamin is someone I'm really high on this year as like a depth wide receiver. He could pay huge dividends for me. And with that in mind, now I can go on ahead and take I like all four of these guys. Just to be on the safe side, Dwayne Allen. Take the top guy on the board. Though I would have felt confident with any of them. I'm probably going to take my quarterback here soon, because even though I could possibly get away with taking Carson Palmer or Eli Manning, I'd rather feel comfortable with the knowledge that I already have him locked up no matter what. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm going to go on and take Carson Palmer. Not the easiest decision I've ever made, but had to be made. I'm also going to do something that probably goes against the norm, and I'm going to take the Broncos defense. Why? Because with the position I was going to be in the 14th, you'll notice, this is what I would have been left with had I picked. Now, I like the Texans defense. Don't get me wrong. I pick them generally if I'm picking the defense last, basically in a 12-teamer, but I wanted to have insurance, basically. So that's why I took Denver. I like Matt Bryan as a kicker, I guess, but that's not really important. The guy that I'm taking next is going to be important. And I think he's going to take a kicker and a wide receiver. He took Doug Baldwin. Thank you. I will take Anquan Bolden. And wabam. That was a pretty good team. Not the best team I've ever drafted, but pretty good. Pretty much solid top to bottom. I got top talent at every position. Even kicker, yes, even kicker, even though some experts might disagree. I think Matt Bryan is in for a top 5 year, personally. But now let's see them say that I was like 5th out of 14 or something. Because sometimes Fantasy Pros doesn't, like, every time I'm confident, okay, most of the time when I'm confident, very confident about my team, it says that I didn't do that well. Well, this time I did very well. You notice when I go to the team analysis, I, of course, had the #1 running back, but I also pretty much hit on everything, except for maybe Colston as my wide receiver 2. But realistically, I like Marcus Colston as my wide receiver 2. So it doesn't really matter. And my worst position, according to this, is kicker. Big deal. Now, I'm going to do one more draft. This is the one that I'm really excited about because it's pretty accurate how it's done, and it's actually kind of shocking how accurate it is. The quarterbacks. 12-team, 2 quarterbacks. I'm going to pick 8th, too, so that makes things even harder. If I was picking, say, 1st or 12th, my decision would be way easier, for example. And especially now that Brees is gone, I'm kind of torn. Do I take a quarterback? Do I take Megatron? Do I take Eddie Lacy? It's a standard league. Actually, not as easy a decision as I would hope. Normally in this situation, I take Eddie Lacy in a standard league because of the fact that receptions don't count, obviously, so Megatron's value doesn't increase. But in a 2-quarterback league, even in a 12-teamer, you have to think a little harder about that. Even still, I'll take Lacy just because in standard, there's the top 5 running backs and then everybody else. And you see I get left with another interesting decision because I could take Nick Foles or I could take Calvin Johnson. I'm taking Calvin Johnson. I am taking Megatron. It's going to leave me weak at quarterback, admittedly, but I'm going to take quarterback with my next 2 picks so it offsets. Like, for example, I'm going to take Russell Wilson as my first quarterback. Now, I would normally take Andy Dalton as my QB2, but because of the bye week, and I don't feel comfortable taking two quarterbacks on my bench, I'm going to take Big Ben, even if I'm not a big fan of his this year. just because I need to have that top level. I need to at least have some sort of consistency at the top. As for wide receiver and running back now, I'm high on Ryan Matthews. I'm high on him, especially if he stays healthy. He's easily RB2 level at the very least. And like I said, I'm pretty high on a number of guys at wide receiver too. So I'm going to go ahead and take Ben Tate as my flex. And, okay, I'm going to take Kendall Wright here 10 times out of 10 as my wide receiver too. Or, actually maybe not, Jeremy Maclin. Yeah, I don't know why I said 10 times out of 10 for Kendall Wright when I just thought, well, wait a second, Maclin's still on the board. Jeremy Maclin. And then as you go down the board here, you'll notice that there's one position that actually hasn't really been taken care of by many people. Tight end. Vernon Davis's ADP right now is 47. I just got a hell of a steal with them right there. And that's fantastic. I'm going to go on ahead and take Danny Woodhead because I want to have... He's my favorite handcuff to have in fantasy football this year, bar none. And the fact that Kendall Wright is still there is kind of ridiculous. But I'm going to go on and take Flacco because I'm not very confident in Ben Roethlisberger as my 2. And guys like Terrence Williams, Brandon Cooks, and Sammy Watkins are all still available for some reason. Terrence Williams, again, another steal. There's no reason why he should still be out there. Notice just now the Seahawks and San Francisco defenses just went off the board. That's how crazy 2 quarterback drafts go normally. How crazy they are normally. Now that I've taken a guy basically that could be capable of relieving both Calvin Johnson and Jeremy Maclin, I feel comfortable with taking Sammy Watkins as my 4th. Let's see, what else is left? I don't really need to worry about a defense now because realistically I can get one 14th, 15th round and be fine. And because of that, I'm going to take Kelvin Benjamin as my 5th wide receiver. Pretty awesome. And I'm going to take Tyler Eifert as my backup for Vernon Davis. I'm going to be shafted a bit at defense, but that's okay. I'm used to it. If it comes down to the Browns, Bucks, and Texans, actually, you know what? I'm going to take the Bucks because I'm pretty high in the Bucks. I'm high in the Texans too, but I'm higher on the Bucks. And then, of course, kicker, I guess, Dan Bailey. You can't really go wrong to me with Bailey, Crosby, or Matt Bryant this year. But there you go. 2 quarterbacks. Took 5-10 minutes to complete. That's amazing, isn't it? That is amazing. I love this. I love FantasyPros Draft Wizard. It's amazing. You can basically take care of mock drafts in minutes as opposed to perhaps an hour. It's wonderful. I thought about the possibility of doing a fantasy football calculator mock draft because that's probably the best place to get a legitimate mock draft. But for now, I think I'm just going to stop here. Yeah, I'll stop here for now. If you do decide to watch, thank you for watching. I'm Red, and that's my favorite fantasy football tools. I will see you guys later.